Okay, welcome. My name is Ellen Calvis. I am a Bedford Town Board member and I am co-chair of the Police Reform and Reinvention Collaborative Committee, along with Chief Melvin Padilla and County Legislator Kitley Koval. Thank you for being here. I will briefly explain the work of the committee and the objective of the listening session, and then we will begin to hear from you. In response to the national outcry concerning racial disparities in policing, Governor Cuomo issued an order that makes state funding contingent upon each locality participating in a process to review policing in their community. The Bedford Police Reform, Reinvention, and Collaborative Committee has been convened to undergo this process in Bedford and write a report to submit to the state by April 1st. The governor's order asks that each locality undergo a review of its police agency and make reforms if necessary that promote trust, fairness, and legitimacy, and to address any racial bias and disproportionate policing of communities of color. This process is not meant to be an attack on, nor an attempt to defund our police. It is also not a public referendum to generally state support for the police. The process is meant to be collaborative and constructive as we review our local police department that may or may not lead to some changes in procedures or practices in the Bedford Police Department. For example, in hiring, we understand that civil service rules severely restrict who may be considered to be hired. And that is something our subcommittee on hiring wants to look at and suggest changes to the state so that our police department may consider more candidates when hiring. The committee will go through several phases in the process. Phase one is listening. The committee wants to hear from you so that you might share your experiences with the Bedford Police and what you need and expect from our local police department. Tonight is the first of many more listening opportunities. Phase two, the committee will review policies, practices, and procedures of the Bedford Police to see if these reflect what the community wants from its police agency. Phase three, the committee drafts a report with reforms or changes it recommends, and there will be opportunities for public input. And then phase four is revising, incorporating that public input and submitting the report to the state. This listening session is for Bedford residents, Bedford business owners, and people who have had specific interactions with the Bedford Police to make a statement. Please put your name in the chat box to sign up, and we will call on you. Statements should be 3 minutes or less so everyone has a chance to speak. There will not be an opportunity for back and forth dialogue during this session. It is merely a listening session. Later in the phases I described, the committee will produce a draft report with recommendations, and at that time, there will be opportunities for the public to comment and ask for explanations. This is the first in a series of listening sessions. It will be recorded, and the recording will be available on the town website. If you do not want to make a statement here or wish to give additional feedback, or have questions, you may reach the committee at Bedford PRRCC at bedfordny.gov, and I will put that email address in the chat. So if you go to the bottom of your screen and see where it says chat, you can click on that, and over on the right, you can put your name in the chat box, and I will call on you to speak. And it looks like I see the name Susie will be the first one to speak. Susie? And it looks like, Michelle, we have to unmute.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Well, this is the first time I've ever had the opportunity to be on this, so I would go last so I can understand what this is all about.
Okay, we can put you at the bottom if you'd like.
Yeah, this way
Okay.
I can know what I'm listening for and what I'm listening to, and I don't want to sound too ignorant.
Okay. Scott Kaufman. And please state maybe where you live and your name when you start.
Hello, my name is Scott Kaufman. Sure, I live in Bedford Hills. So first of all, I want to express a sincere thank you to the working group present this evening who is devoting time and energy to this topic tonight. It is easy to dismiss our bucolic town as exempt from the issues of brutality and corruption that are the subject of protests in cities and towns all around this country. We live in a town where crime rates, and particularly violent crime rates, are exceedingly low, which means that we residents are likely to rarely have to consider issues of criminal justice. That being said, despite the fact that many town residents may have not had interactions with the criminal justice system, it is time that we think about how our own contributions to the system is perpetuating something that might be unjust and inequitable. Even in our town, 41% of misdemeanor arrests and 41% of misdemeanor drug-related arrests, coincidentally, are Black or Hispanic people based on data from the DCJS. This is a town that is 82% white. Yes, this means that our town is likely contributing to a system that introduces Black and Hispanic youth into a criminal justice system that may haunt them for the rest of their lives at a far higher rate than whites. And yet, we give this department around 1/3 of our general fund budget, $8 million approximately, to staff a 40-person force of armed law enforcement agents with negligible oversight, and this is the largest expense in our general budget. For comparison, we have committed only around $70,000 to new affordable housing this year. People here may think that I am accusing individuals within the Bedford Police of racism, and I can emphatically tell you that this is not the case. I do believe that most, if not all, of the members of the force are good and nice people. This system of policing is, however, grounded in implicit bias and racism. If the outsized proportion of Black and Hispanic arrests were a one-off statistic for our town, perhaps we could write it off as a statistical anomaly, but it reflects in countywide, statewide, and nationwide numbers. So to bring this full circle, we are privileged to live in a town of general economic prosperity and low crime rates, which means we don't have many of the same issues that other cities and towns across this country, state, and nation need to deal with and consider. This also gives us the benefit of a relatively low-risk environment in which we can be creative leaders in what reimagined policing might look like. A police force with few to no armed officers, a police force with on-staff social workers and community responders where drug offenders are not necessarily arrested but given help. So why do we want to do this beyond playing a role in the perpetuation of racial bias in criminal justice? One great reason I can think of is to signal to those looking for a welcoming and inclusive place to live that Bedford is just that. And I sincerely hope that this committee takes their role seriously in doing the hard work to creatively think about what is truly needed from our police force and where we can look to alternative solutions to armed law enforcement. Additionally, I hope that this forum allows us for an open introspection without hostility around how our current police force operates, how it fits into the broader narrative around racial bias in policing, and how we can move forward to become a shining example of what might be possible in police reform. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Okay, Matthew Banks.
There we go. I'm unmuted now. Scott, that was wonderful and speaks to many things that I feel myself. For me personally, and I hope I don't get torched and pitchforked for this, but I grew up in Goldensbridge. But the Bedford Police Department in the Katona-Lewisboro School District has been a major part of my life, a major part of my upbringing. We are, intrinsically linked in many ways. Oh, wow. Sorry. Screen changed. I'm confused.
I'll fix that.
My bad. I'm not very good at Zoom. But what was always interesting to me is that, like, when we were moving through the Katona-Lewisboro School District, growing up in Goldensbridge, and then when we got to high school, there was a resource officer, which was now chief secret, and he was wonderful as an individual, but that's an entirely problematic concept to be addressed at a different point. But the fact of the matter is that it was not the Bedford Police Department that was having representation in the Katona-Lewisboro School District. I was always curious about that, because there's all right, yeah, no, I'm yield the rest of my time. I'm sorry. I'm new to this. I thought I'd tune in, expected to listen, then I was excited to speak. I'm sorry, guys.
Okay. Thank you. If you'd
Of
like to
course.
speak again later, you still have a minute.
All right, thanks.
Okay. If anyone else would like to speak, you can put your name in the chat box. Andromeda Klein.
Hello. I don't have a prepared speech. I wasn't planning to speak ahead of time, but I thought I would say hi as a minority in the town and also in this conversation this evening. And I have had interactions with the Bedford Police. They have all been wonderful, and I have never experienced any interactions with the police in this town that were problematic. I have in other towns, but I know that's not what we're discussing this evening. I would like to say that I feel in general, a large part of the issue with policing is not just because of the police, it's because of the people that call the police. And so as a part of the reform, what I would really love to see is not only the education of the police officers that I know it's been discussed that they need cultural sensitivity or bias training or those types of things, but also for there to be more events within our community where people have the opportunity to be exposed to their neighbors that are neighbors of color and exposed to our culture and things of this nature where we don't seem so different or so threatening that simply walking through the neighborhood with our stroller would prompt someone to call the police, because I did have that happen to me when I first moved here. The police that showed up were lovely, and it wasn't an issue with the police, but it was an issue that I was simply walking with my baby stroller in a new neighborhood and someone saw me and felt the need to call the police. So that's a larger issue, and I think that it is something that should be addressed in the reform. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak? To put your name in the chat, or Elizabeth Messenger.
Hi there. Thank you for this forum and for the remarks that have already been made. I didn't intend to speak, but I did want to say that some of the contact that I've had with the police has had to do with the emergency shelter partnership when there have been really minor disruptions. You know, I guess I'm just feeling that that desire for maybe a different way of having social services that aren't the police in a situation where, you know, somebody is intoxicated and might need some guidance and to be able to de-escalate a situation, for instance. And I really appreciate Andromeda's remarks about the need to think about our community rather than the police officers perhaps themselves. But certainly, as lucky as we are to live in such a safe environment, we're certainly a microcosm of the other problems. So I'm glad that we're looking at this closely, and thank you for the opportunity to share.
Thank you. Next we have Frank Pedraza.
Hi, good afternoon. We are relatively new in Katona. We came from Chicago 5 years ago. And I think this is a wonderful initiative. I look forward to participating and contributing. I'd like to mention an incident that I had with the police, which to me reveals a systemic problem that I wonder if it's unique or if any of my colleagues have faced something similar. I live off Peapon Road down from Carramore, and the speed limit on that road is 30 miles an hour. I was driving some time ago, a few months ago, and was stopped by the police. And he said, identified, he was very polite, you were going too fast. And I said, sorry, there were no cars on the road. there's no traffic. I may have gone a little. He said you were going 40 miles an hour. So, but he said, I'm going to give you a break. Instead of giving you a ticket for speeding, I'm going to give you a ticket for some minor violation. And I was very appreciative. And I thought, oh, great. Thank you very much. And he said, you'll get in the mail a ticket. So, a few days later, I did receive an email, a letter from the judge, and with a bill for $145. And I looked at it and it said $45 is the fine and $100 for court costs. And I remember when I filled out the form that I sent, there's a choice that you can say, I'm guilty or not guilty. I put down guilty, which I was, and I assumed that meant I don't go to court. What's the point of going to court? So I disputed that and said, why? Okay, $45. I'm surprised. I thought, I explained I went to the police to explain that. And they said, but my big complaint was the $100. I said, I did not go to court. Why should I pay that? Then they said, complain to the governor. That is what the system calls for. And I find that, first of all, I don't know if the policeman knew that that's what happens, that whenever they write a ticket, there is an automatic $100 added to it, whether you're guilty or not. So that's a question I have. I realize it's a small thing in the context of everything, but I don't think it helps our relations with police to have things like this happen. And I wonder if it is that they have quotas, or that they're not supposed to have quotas, that they have to submit.
Frank?
So that's,
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, next up is Brett Kaplan.
Am I
There.
unmuted now? Great.
Yes.
Hi, this is Brett Kaplan. I'm a former resident of Katona. In my time at the Katona Elementary School, up through John Jay Middle and High School, I noticed school resource officers during my entire time there. I did not see them provide a reason for their presence. It seemed like an out-of-place person with a gun in a building full of young students, and I'm not sure why we still have them. I cede my time.
Thank you. Okay, next up, Robert, on Robert's iPhone.
Hello?
Hello, we can hear you.
Yes, I just have one question. This is a very important issue, and I think what we need to address is the system itself rather than the officers, the individuals. And I'm wondering why Bedford does not have a sheriff who is accountable to the public through elections rather than an appointed official through the mayor's or supervisor's office. That's
Robert,
all I have to say.
Okay, and what's your last name, Robert?
Kohler. I'm
Thanks.
a resident of Katona.
Great, thanks. Okay, Susie's ready. And she has a different name on her screen.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I really thought this was a discussion about the police department, as far as that gentleman that spoke about, yeah, there is always in all municipalities or different courts, you do get it's a state charge and it's a municipality charge, just the way it is. It always is when you get a ticket. So that's his answer. But in any case, I thought we would have somebody that would answer, or we're just speaking. Is that what we have? Just speaking and no one answers? They just say what they feel, but there's no answers given. I thought we were talking about the police department. Maybe I'm wrong, but I've been here for 38 years. And I find that, and I'm in Katona, and I lived in, this is my second home, and I brought my children up here, and I have not had any issues with the police except positive ones, ultra positive ones. And I don't think that this town could really represent under any circumstances, systemic or any other racial problems, because we are very limited on that. I have 2 children, went to John Jay, and I'm from the Bronx. I was born and raised there. And I have to say that when I moved to Katona 38 years ago, and I brought my children up here, I call them the Katona Bubble Kids. And I know the difference between going to a minority school. I was the minority. And this is not a subject, I think, that we can possibly have, because we're all ignorant here. And all I can say is that our police department is nothing but I have the utmost respect for them. And I don't think that they can be an example for anybody in any type of racial situation, because we don't have that type of population where we live. And that's what I thought our discussion was, how the police department treat us. They treat us all, as far as I know, equal. And I think that there has not been one person, and not that there's many, that could possibly say that which they didn't say, that they have any issues with the police department. So why isn't this about the police department?
Okay, thank you. Susie, can you tell us your last name, please, for
Yeah.
the record?
Friedman.
Friedman.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll just reiterate what I said in the beginning, that this is the committee members of the Police Reform and Reinvention Collaborative Committee are here to listen to the public, and their job will be to listen to what the community has to say about the role of the police in our community, what it is, what it could be, and their experiences with the police. And then the committee is reviewing policies, procedures, and practices of the police to come up with, how the police are doing at what the community expects them to do. So your statement has been heard by the committee, and it will be taken into consideration when they are reviewing the materials from the police and how the community interacts with the police. And then later in the process, there will be an opportunity to see the recommendations made by the committee and give feedback and have more of an exchange with the people working on this. So this is really just for listening. Lee Presser is up next.
All right, good evening. Thanks for having me. First, I will also point out that I have the utmost respect for our police department and our officers. I think they do a fabulous job. As far as this forum, it is a police reform and reinvention collaborative, so I'd like to get to the collaborative portion of this. And this means us, members of the public, working in collaboration with the police. And I think one of my concerns is that with what we see going on in this country, there are a growing number of gun owners, more people applying for licenses, and more guns out there. And I am pro Second Amendment, but that's a person's right. However, I believe that one way that we can collaborate is by educating and really teaching people proper use of a weapon. I grew up in a house where my dad was one of the very few people in New York City with a civilian concealed carry permit. We knew about gun safety. I remember from probably when I was about 10 years old, I was learning about safety. And I really believe that this is an opportunity for our police department to reach out and work with the community and teach gun safety, because you're not going to take the guns away from people, but teach people how they can be safe. Teach them about gun safes and how to make sure that the gun is stored properly. And we really want to avoid accidents, and certainly we want to avoid accidental shootings and confrontations with our police. That is probably the one thing that worries me the most about more and more people owning guns, is that the likelihood of there being gun violence or a shooting incident with our police increases as we have more gun owners in our community. So it is critical to teach everyone. And I know, because my dad had a concealed carry permit, that if and when we were pulled over, my dad always made it known that he was carrying, so there were no surprises. And it was handled very differently maybe 30, 40 years ago than it is today. However, with a collaborative effort on all our parts, we can keep our police force as good as it is. I believe it's one of the best, if not the best, in Westchester County. And I'd like to keep them there. And I just don't want to see any incidents in the future that are going to tarnish that reputation.
Thank you. Okay, is someone named Aza? Isa? On, and just, I think it's named iPhone on the screen.
Hi, yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, how are you? My name is Aza. I'm new to Katona, but some people might have seen me and my kids. We would stand outside on the corner of Harris and Bedford Road thanking the essential workers during the pandemic and things of that sort. I've had an issue with the police department that's been ongoing for a couple of weeks now. And I brought my my concerns to Governor Cuomo, also to the Bedford supervisor. I also spoke to the chief. And I'm very appalled that I've been in contact with the chief all last week via cell phone, via email. He did not mention this forum at all to me. And I'm very appalled by that, because I found out last minute through email about it. Now, I had an issue with stolen property. I went to the police station to make a police report. Somebody else had a similar stolen issue from their property. Their report was taken seriously, but mine was not. And I was the only minority in the situation. And I went there and I spoke to Sergeant Rusco, and I asked him, why was my report not taken seriously? He could not answer me. He said that he'll call me by 3 p.m. on October 5th, and you see what day it is today, and I still have not heard from him. Not an apology, not a police report, nothing. And I feel like this is really ridiculous. I've never had no problems with the Bedford Police Department. I'm friends with a few of their officers, but this is ridiculous and they need to be exposed.
Thank you, Aza. Can you tell me your last name? Oh, wait, you're muted again. Go ahead.
Sorry, it's Sims.
Thank you. Sorry, there should be names in the chat. Anyone else would like to speak? Put your name in the chat or wave. Hi, Judith, are you waving? Here, we have to unmute you first.
I am waving because I don't know how to do the chat.
That's okay.
I do not live in Bedford. I live in Goldensbridge. But I was told about this meeting by Reverend Melissa Boyer, and she urged me to come. And I'm very, I want to make very clear that I am not sharing what I will talk about because I want to come down on the police. I really have a lot of sympathy for the police because I think they're in a very difficult situation. because we know something about implicit racism, and to be frightened of the other, whatever the other is, and to carry a gun is a very complicated thing. I'm a psychologist. Okay. So the reason I'm here is because I want to speak on behalf of a young Black man who is now in his 30s, so that we can be aware that this never happens to another young Black person. I was a mentor. I'll call him John. I was a mentor to John. And he was the only Black person at John Jay High School. He was very, very aware that he was different. And he lived in Katona. And he graduated John Jay and started college at Hunter. I was helping him write his papers. I just adored him. He was a beautiful, beautiful guy. And he had a job at Mrs. Green's in Katona. And every Friday, the kids from Mrs. Green's, and Jonathan was the only Black one among them, would get together after work and they would party. And they were coming home on a Friday night, and the designated driver was next to Jonathan. And a car came out of a 7-Eleven and rammed into them. The police came, the ambulance came, the young woman driving the car was taken away, and Jonathan was taken out of the car, strip searched. They found one joint in his pocket. He was handcuffed. He was taken to the jail. I went with his mom the next morning to the courtroom. He was in shackles. He was in an orange suit, one joint in his pocket. He was so humiliated and his dream was so destroyed that he really started smoking heavily, gave up his job, dropped out of school. His mother told him to leave home until he got his act together. He became homeless. Fast forward, he's now working, cleaning offices at night in a skyscraper in Manhattan. It's a heartbreak. And I see him, we talk every week. And I did speak with Chief Padilla. I did sit with him. And he asked me, did I want to press charges? I mean, it's years later. I don't want to press charges. That's not why I'm speaking. I'm speaking because I don't want there to be another Jonathan. And I offered to Chief Padilla that I would even be willing to sit with any police who was having trouble, you know, with any issues involving young people of color, or, you know, just because I really do sympathize with the issues. But I just felt like I needed to speak on behalf of young people.
Thank you. Thank you, Judith.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, Andromeda would like to speak again. And since we don't have
Right.
a lot of people online, you're welcome to speak again if anyone would like to speak again.
Yes, I just wanted to follow up and say that one of the other people who spoke kept referring to those people. As one of those people, that is collectively the issue that we're dealing with, right? And if the police also see people that look like me as those people, that is an issue not only because we are subject to an implicit bias, but because we are hesitant to call the police when we need assistance. And that is true for me, that should I have issues where in most situations you would pick up your phone and call the police, I stop and I think twice about it. And oftentimes I'm afraid to call the police for help because I don't know if they're going to show up at my house that I own and see me as a threat. And so there has to be some way to have some cultural infusion and some dialogue between others, or like whatever we are. We're all humans. If you cut us open, we all look the same on the inside. We might have different religious backgrounds or political backgrounds, but we all live in this town together. And there has to be a way where we can know our police and our police know us, to try and minimize those implicit biases that we all have. I am half Black and half white. And because of that, I have been raised with a privilege that some of my other Black family has not been raised with. And also being aware that I too see things through a whitewash filter and had to actively work against that. And I'm half Black. So if I experienced that kind of education growing up in this country, so did every single other person on this Zoom call. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Gail, would you like to speak? Oh.
Am I, can you, okay.
Yes.
I have lived in Katona since 1968. I'm not maybe the oldest, but it's likely I'm the oldest person on this panel. I've lived, since 1979, I've lived on Anderson Road. And in 1979, Anderson Road and Fisher, where my property also extends to, was predominantly houses owned or rented by African Americans. And so I got to know a few of the people who lived on my street and the street behind. Not really well, not nearly as well as I would have liked to have, but I remember being in a book discussion at the Presbyterian Church, and we were discussing race issues. And the minister there, I don't know if any of you remember Bruce White, lovely man, and a man who really wanted to be contributing to the universe in the best way. And during the discussion, he said, well, you know, we don't have any racism here in Katona, I don't think. And having lived on a street where it was predominantly African American, I had to put in my 2 cents worth, which is what I'm doing now. I do think that because Katona is pretty rarefied, I mean, there we've got Martha Stewart and Ralph Lauren and many very wealthy people. We think of Katona being mostly white. So those people who are not white have a different story to tell. I could tell you some stories. It would take too long. You can imagine what those stories are. And so I do want, especially the woman from, I think she was from Golden's Bridge, who said she thought that this was not necessary. It seemed that it was not as necessary as it would be in a more urban community. And it's true. I do think that here, our police department is probably very responsive to the needs of diversity compared to most other police departments. But just seems, I don't know any incident about the police in the last probably couple of decades, but I do know that there have been plenty before, and I have a feeling that those of us with brown and Black skins could tell you a lot more than those of us who have white skins. So I just need to say that. And this endeavor is of utmost importance.
Thank you. And can you tell us your last name for the record? Oh, hold on, you got muted again. Michelle, you're good. I think it's Dunkelberger. Okay, I'm having a hard time. Oh, I'm having a hard time unmuting Gail. Is anyone else lined up in the chat? Would anyone else like to wave to speak? Oh, let's see. And I think, oh, Jeremy. Jeremy has not yet spoken.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. Hello, everyone. I would just like to thank the board and especially Ms. Calvis for inviting me to this meeting. My name is Jeremy Kartika. I live in the Farms neighborhood in Bedford Village for the past 3 years with my wife Dominique and our daughter Scarlett. In my time living here, I've had nothing but positive interactions with our police officers. I currently serve as an officer with the Village of Mamaroneck Police Department, and prior to this, I served with the New York City Police Department. I'm humbled to have worked with so many professional men and women in both organizations. I'm proud to say some of the most professional and personable officers that I've met and trained with have been from the Bedford Police Department. Our officers are a vital component in what makes our quality of life so great here in Bedford. Many events in our parks and neighborhood have taken place peacefully and safely, and I credit this to our officers' presence. From personal experience, during the time my wife was home with our newborn daughter, I would often have to work late, and on my way home, I always felt a sigh of relief seeing our officers vigilant on patrol nearby Route 22. I would like to thank our Bedford Police Department for everything they do to make our community one of the safest areas in the country. With that said, I encourage our community to continue to support our police department and recognize so many great things they do each day that tends to go unnoticed. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. And will you state your last name again?
Sure, Kartika.
Kartika, thank you.
Thank you.
Lisa Schwartz. Oh, hold on, Lisa, you're still muted. There you are.
Okay, most people would like to mute me, but so thank you for hosting this event tonight. The town board, the new committee, and all the residents who turned out here. I think it's really pretty wonderful that we can have dialogue and facilitate this. The last speaker with whose remarks I think are fabulous. But he concluded with, and I think we should all support our police. I'm not sure that any of us on this call don't support our police. We do have a wonderful history here in this community for the most part. I happen to sit on the hospital board, and right now we're studying a lot about health equity and health justice. I go into a hospital, I get medical care, I get treatment, and I assume everybody does. Well, it's naive to think that. It turns out a lot of people don't get access, don't get treatment, don't get equity. So in this day and age, with the incidents in this country, I think it would be naive of any of us to think that there is that we are a perfect community and a perfect police force. But it's also, and I'm not faulting the police because I'm talking to the community members, mostly not the ones on this call, but where the abundance of signs that have popped up that say we support our police, it's become code for we stand with the police, and I don't know what the rest of you are all talking about. And I think that we have to dialogue. I noticed some of the chat earlier on waiting for some response from the police themselves. I think this task force should take on whatever incidents like that were brought up earlier by the young woman who talked about not having a police report. The other woman who said she wouldn't even go to the police. We would be naive to think those things don't exist. But to support and expect justice for all and specifically for the members of our Black community and people of color in this community, is not to say that we are not for the police. The community needs some education as well as this dialogue, that it is not an either-or situation. And so I hope that you'll take that into account as your committee moves forward with listening and solving our local issues.
Thank you. Frank Green?
Okay, I guess I'm unmuted there. Thank you for doing this, Ellen, and for inviting me, and thank you to the board, and thank you for the governor to making it a requirement. I guess I'd like to echo the praise that most folks have expressed for the professionalism and the courtesy demonstrated by Bedford Police. I was a crime victim about a year ago, and my interactions with the cops were absolutely stellar. Very, very smart, insightful, professional, everything that you would expect. But I guess, you know, whether that's because I'm a privileged white male or not, who knows? But at least they did their job and they did it well. I guess the two things I would like to say that are criticisms, because that's what this is for, is as a longtime organizer of the Katona 5K, one of the biggest obstacles that the organizers had was raising the $4,000 or $5,000 that it costs to pay the overtime to the police who are going to sit in their cars and watch the runners go by. I just, you know, sort of always, you know, it was a big lift for us. You know, we raise this money from local businesses and then we give it to the police and it's all got to be paid in overtime. It's like, it just doesn't make sense. So in terms of community outreach, community connection, community support, I mean, this is a not-for-profit fundraising exercise to support a local charity. And we have to pay all this money. It's like nuts. So I would love to see the police say, we want to be partners in this. We want to support this. We want to donate our time. So that would be one thing. Another is what I've noticed. I've been in Bedford and Katona since 1991. Raised my children here. They're off living their lives. When we moved here, the brand of the police, the way they portrayed themselves, was kind of familiar and far less intimidating than what we see today. They drove green and white cars that said Bedford on the side and kind of a funky typeface. And it just seemed, you know, you looked at that and you said, wow, these cops are pretty relaxed and informal. This must be a pretty safe place. Now, with the black and white dragnet, you know, 5.0 Dano cars with and SUVs with the big bumpers on front, and you know, and the officers all suited up like they're, you know, going to, you know, a firefight. I think the cops have become a little too militarized for my taste. I think they need to take a look at how they present and what that says to people who might be traumatized in their interactions with police and might react negatively. I mean, I understand there's a time and a place when the cop has to be a warrior, not a healer, not a helper, but I think those times are few and far between. And the kind of portraying the brand as being all about that, instead of something that's a lot closer to normal, is something that Chief Padilla and his staff and the board even should and this group should think about and work on a little bit, because I think there's a message that's sent there that's intimidating, that's authoritarian, it's scary, and it's unnecessary. And I think it affects, I would imagine it would affect the mindset and the behavior of the officers, and I would think it certainly affects the way that, you know, civilians look.
Thank you, Frank.
So,
thank you.
Sorry, you're welcome.
Okay, Alexander Skillman.
Oh, I'm already unmuted. Okay, cool. I thought what Scott had to say was really good. He brought up some statistics I didn't know about. I wish I could have written something as prepared as he did, but I took a lot of notes, so let's see how reading these out goes. Yeah, I agree, especially Judith's story. I think policing is, like, no matter where you are, policing is very kind of burdened by its history. Like, you go back to slave patrols or union busters, and those are kind of how police were set up. And since then, there have been no real foundational changes to the police. Obviously, they perform a much different function than they used to. But this is a police reinvention committee as well as reform committee. So here we have the opportunity to institute kind of more fundamental changes that could spread to other municipalities and even like statewide or federal, because that's what happens with municipal reforms, is that they tend to spread. That's like how gay marriage happened and that kind of thing. Personally, I won't say where for reasons, but I have worked with a lot of undocumented immigrants, and there are many municipalities, especially kind of in the Western US, that are sanctuary cities. We could just look at perhaps decriminalizing, or maybe looking the other way at the type of things that Judith was talking about, because yes, Katona is like, and Bedford are very white and there's low crime and stuff. But our entire country is beholden to like policies of minimum sentencing, like tough on crime policies that aren't really relevant anymore. I'd just like to insert that, like, not that I have an axe to grind particularly about this, but since people were saying I've had a lot of positive experiences with the police, I and friends of mine, kind of just in the more general Westchester area and here as well, have had not so positive experiences sometimes. Not that I'm blaming individual officers, but I won't totally get into those stories right now. I'd just like to say that, like, you know, I don't want to go after individual officers or anything like that. It's just that individuals can't solve structural problems, and that's why we're all here in a committee instead of, you know, out doing our own thing.
Okay, thank you, Alexander.
Sure.
You're at 3 minutes. I think Scott wanted to have a chance to speak again. There's no one else signed up in the chat. So Scott, if you'd like to say something else.
Sure. I think just a couple of things. One, and these are more sort of points of feedback as you move through the committee. So I think one, to the individual who was stating that part of the reason we don't need to worry about this is because we lack diversity in our town, and therefore it's not a problem that we need to deal with. I'm probably synthesizing, and perhaps that would be a mischaracterization, but I think that is generally the idea. I think first of all, we should probably as a town seek ways in which we can build more diversity within our town. So I don't think that we should just take it for granted that we are not a diverse town and we should do nothing about that and just be fine being a town that's 82% white. I think for all of us, it would be beneficial to think about equitable policies we can have, such as more affordable housing that would presumably require taking some funding of the $8 million that we currently spend on the police force towards maybe the $70,000 that we currently spend on affordable housing, which is an unbelievably low number compared to approximately a third of our budget on the police force. Secondly, I do think as you move forward through these hearings, it's going to be critical that you look to neighboring towns. I know that neighboring towns were not currently allowed. I think it's naive to think that our police force doesn't impact Mount Kisco, particularly because Mount Kisco doesn't actually have a police force and they contract with the county police, and they're significantly more diverse than we are. That's just a fact. So considering the arrest statistics of 40% of arrests being Hispanic, it's quite possible that they are not necessarily residents of Bedford. They might be residents of Mount Kisco, and to not allow them to have any say in the matter would be pretty much doing us a disservice. We need to include them, and particularly some of those immigrant communities that might not necessarily live in our town that are very, very, very much impacted our policing, because many of them work in our town. I think a fair amount of them probably work in our town, right? And to not include them is definitely something that probably should be addressed going forward. I think that's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Just so everyone knows, the chat box is to sign up to speak, and the comments there will not be part of the record. That doesn't get recorded with the Zoom. So if somebody would like to say anything, please sign up to speak. And if there's anything that's being entered in the chat box that you want, recorded for the committee to hear, for those on the committee who couldn't make it tonight, please sign up to speak. And Brett Kaplan would like to speak again.
Hi, Brett Kaplan again. I think it is a little bit inappropriate in a forum that's supposed to be about citizens giving feedback on police that we are considering feedback from police officers. I know that the police officer who gave feedback is not a police officer of this town, but there is already a perception that I agree with that police tend to back other police, even across jurisdictions, which makes this feel kind of like patting oneself on the back. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Desiree. Are you unmuted? There you are.
Okay, sorry, that took a while. First off, I just want to say thank you to the committee and the people who have agreed to be on this committee for their time to be a part of something that I think is really important. I am a resident of Katona and have lived here for 15 years and have seen the Bedford Police under, I think, 3 different leadership positions, people who led the department. And I am aware that whoever is chosen by our elected town supervisor, or I learned that after living here. And I have seen a difference in policing with each administration. And I feel that a committee like this is important because although currently I feel quite confident in our police department for the most part, I know that I have heard pretty horrible situations in the town where things haven't gone so well. But I do feel that having a committee in which residents could go to with concerns when they are maybe fearful to go to the police is an important thing, and having somewhere where we can constructively come up with ideas in which relationships between the public and the police department can be strengthened, whether that's through community outreach, is really important because, as you know, leadership is key and leadership changes. So while it may be great today, it may not be great tomorrow. So this is an important forum, I think, and I thank you for that. And also I agree that more needs to be done within the community because there is a lot of racism in this community that has nothing to do with the police. So, but the police often do get called in. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Haywood.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So thank you for having this forum. This is really good. I moved here about 2 years ago. I've had so far pretty good experience. First, I wanted to make a quick point about police. I think it's important for people to remember that being a police officer is a choice. It's a profession. You don't have to be a police officer. I am a social worker. I worked in the city for a long time before coming up here. I worked in foster care as a case worker and a supervisor. Very difficult job, going into impoverished communities, sometimes, dangerous communities, taking kids out of homes. That's a profession that I've chose, I love, and I have a passion for. But it's something that I could leave as well. So I think it's important for people to recognize when they're balancing a Black man sitting here, that I can't leave being a Black man. A person who is a police officer can decide whether they want to be a police officer or not. So when I see signs that say Blue Lives Matter, and I see signs that say Black Lives Matter, to me, those two things are not comparable, because one side has a choice and the other does not. I think that's important to recognize. On the point of militarized police, the police are militarized. It's kind of a chicken or egg. I know Mr. Presser brought up more and more people are getting guns. Well, we need to look at that in society. Society is becoming more militarized, so our police are becoming more militarized. So maybe we teach kids not to have guns and not to resort to that sort of, violence, and do more social work, do more talking, teach kids more about SEL and educating them about communication. I think that would be a better road than teaching kids about how to handle guns. I think also looking at other communities that have been progressive already with police officers. It's not so much police, but what do we want police to be involved in? Police are trained to do as they do, just like everyone's trained to do what they do. But we, policy-wise, can decide what police should be involved in and what they shouldn't be. Should a police officer always have to show up on every single noise complaint, every single complaint that is made? Or are there different types of units that don't have guns, that are not militarized, that can show up first, that can deal with situations? So thinking about policy and how you utilize police officers for actual emergencies, for actual things that could cause people harm, might be something that people can explore and think about. Thank you.
Thank you. Elizabeth wants to speak again.
Thank you. I know that people have expressed, a need and a desire to work on how we build a more inclusive community. And I was really pleased to see Haywood Berman at this meeting, because he's chairing a committee, a new town committee, on inclusion, diversity, and equity for the town of Bedford. And I'm proud to serve on that committee as well. We are in nascent stages, but I look forward to that committee being a place where people can bring their concerns, and we can educate our community, and we can be in coordination with other town committees and understand that all of what's wrong socially is not landing on police shoulders, but to the important point made by so many people today, especially Andromeda, that this is really about us as a society, us as a community, and how we can build safety through more inclusive conduct. I'm not saying that there aren't serious problems that we need to tackle within the police department. I don't pretend to have the expertise on that. I don't pretend to have any expertise. I'm an educator, a parent, somebody who's lived in Bedford for over 20 years. But I do want to say that I'm heartened that there are structures within the town, nascent stages, but hardworking, dedicated people who have real dedication to making things better. And I hope that the communication within the committees and getting our word out that we're there to hear these issues might strengthen the whole community.
Oh, thank you. I muted myself. If anyone's just joining us, please put your name in the chat so that we can hear your statement. Oh, Judith. Hold on, we have to unmute you. There you are.
So I just want to say two very short things. I feel it would be a great contribution and strengthening of every police department if they were trained in the practice of restorative justice. It is a practice, and it is an alternative to punishment, and to restore the dignity of somebody who has trespassed the law. So I just want to say that. And the other thing I just want to say is that for those of you who might be interested, every Saturday at the Green at the Katona Library, there is a vigil for racial justice from 2 to 3 p.m. So just to let you know that.
Thank you. Okay, Patty Ivory.
Well, I'm sorry, I'm joining late. I don't have anything to say.
Oh, okay.
I'm willing to listen. Thank you.
Great. Would anyone else like to make a statement? Gail? Oh, hold on a sec. Michelle's gonna unmute you. It's being temperamental. Okay, no. Michelle, are you?
Sorry, I'm trying. It's for some reason not working. Hold on, let me try it a different way.
I could use sign language.
Okay, there you go.
Okay. I've thought of a thing that I would like to create, and I keep saying I'm going to sit down with my spiral notebook and do it, and I haven't done very concretely, but only sketchily. And this is what it is: a whole kind of ideal. In other words, I don't think that it would be productive to try to say, okay, we've got to go into the police department and change everything. Although there's a part of me, a large part of me, who thinks that would be great. But that can't be done that way. So I thought, well, if you had a dream, or else how are you going to make a dream come true? I like to pretend that I came from Mars, or that I had $1 billion, or that I could wave a magic wand. And what kind of a department would be ideal? And write all that down. And for instance, let me just say one or two things. Like, for instance, not defund the police, or you can separate those duties. It's what defunding really means. But it not decrease their salaries. Give them more money, but make the police like something that deal. Asks that they have degrees in social services, or in psychology, or have a lot behind them, a lot of good vetting behind them. And then the way they would be hired, these are just throwing out things, would be that if something like what happened to George Floyd, where the policeman who murdered him was found to have had 12 violations of violence or citations of violence before that. That would never in a million years happen in this more ideal situation. In other words, the person who hires a policeman better make well sure that that policeman is ideal. Just like if you were a mother who was going back to work and had their first baby and the baby's 9 months old and you have to go back to work and you're going to advertise for a nanny. You want that nanny to be perfect. You want that nanny to never have had any violent thoughts in their head. That's why should we not have this perfect vision to work toward? Because when you give someone a gun and tell them they can pretty much figure out whenever and however they use that gun, that is insanity. And we are, to me, we are living in an insane situation, the way it is set up with the police. I was told by Michael Sussman, who is probably well known with some people as a civil rights lawyer, that the police, the cases he's tried to bring police to accountability have almost 100% failed. In fact, I think he said 100%. And he told us of so obvious that the victim was innocent and that the perpetrator was policeman was guilty, but they always get off. And he said then that we actually were living in a police state, and that the police sort of knew it, but once they really, really do realize it, we will be living in a police state. And that may be a bit of exaggeration, and it may not be an exaggeration.
Okay. Thank you, Gail. Thank you for that. Thank you. So Matthew Banks is waiting to speak. Matthew, you have 3 minutes.
Wonderful. Sorry, excuse me for a moment. I had the exceptional privilege of growing up cisgendered, heterosexual, well, heteroflexible, as I learned later on in life, but that's neither here nor there. But I don't know. I think my parents, my peers, my teachers, everyone throughout the school system thought well of me. And I did a great job. I participated in sports. I did stage plays and whatnot. And then I went to college. And things were great for a while. And honestly, like my fuck-ups that led me to the life that I have right now, where it's 7:15 p.m. on a Thursday evening, I'm talking to my hometown, trying to get them to understand that, like, we just need to be more understanding of people. I'm not really sure if there's a lesson here. I do want to preach one thing that I've learned in a rough and tumble experience. It's that everyone is always going through something more complicated than you could possibly understand. And in fact, you are always going through something more complicated than anyone else could hope to understand. So let's take a moment to be a little bit more forgiving with each other. Let's take a moment to stop and think, as opposed to stop and frisk. And let's also make sure that, like, when we look at demographics and whatnot, we actually make sure that we let the numbers guide us as we look to correct this gross bias that pervades the entirety of our system. I say this to all of you now because I was a little bit of a golden boy back in 2009. But this you know, put your kids through, like, do all the extracurriculars, go all the sports, you know, apply to all the colleges. Like, it doesn't always work. And at the end, you know, we're left with broken people who have been told all their life that they have all the advantages, but they have none of the support structures. And I think in that, we do them dirty. And yeah, no, like, we could do better. Like, let's make sure that we're taking care of our kids who don't do a good job. Like, they're still our kids.
Thank you, Matthew.
That time?
Yep, that's your time. Thank you. If anyone else would like to make a statement, please put your name in the chat. I've also included an email address in the chat if you prefer to email us a statement or ask questions or learn more about what we're doing with this committee. If there's anyone else, oh, Lee Presser would like to say something else. Go ahead, Lee.
Okay. So again, this has been very helpful, very informative. I want to encourage everyone and the committee as well. I think it would be important for the committee to make sure the public understands what it can and cannot do, right? So that we don't have people that are frustrated, because I've seen the chat and there's some frustrated people not understanding what the committee is empowered to do, and also what police are able to do and not able to do, and what the lawmakers have to do. And if the goal is to get laws changed, that's not the police. Police don't change the laws, our lawmakers do. And I think a couple of them have been on the forum, so perhaps they have some takeaways to discuss in Albany. It's just important for everyone to understand what can and cannot be done, so that there are not unrealistic expectations and goals that are being set. And I'm certain there are limitations. As a committee, you can come up with suggestions, but can you really enforce or carry it through? That should be communicated to everyone, maybe at the beginning of each session, or maybe in an email just to the community, so that everyone knows what limitations every player, for lack of a better word, in this arena is up against and actually has in front of them. And I think it would make for much better relations with the police if everyone understood their limitations, what they can and cannot do.
Thank you, Lee.
Thank you.
Haywood would like to speak again.
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly, I put first, thank you, Ms. Messenger. Elizabeth put a link for the IDAC that's coming off the ground that she was talking about. I also put a link, I remember the article that I read back in July that talks about a town that kind of looked at how they utilize the police. And I think it's an interesting kind of article in terms of actually adding more social services, more social workers, more EMT medics to the police department to kind of help the police, kind of these people handle certain situations that don't require physical force or violence. So again, I would look at what are the types of things that we want police to be involved in and what we don't want them to be involved in, so that you avoid these situations to begin with. You know, you're putting police officers in a situation where they're in high stakes, and, you know, some of those situations are not necessary for police officers to be involved in a lot of the time. So I would take a look Yeah.
Okay. Would anyone else like to say anything to the committee? I did receive some emails today that I am happy to read aloud. I have one from Larry Turner, who writes, a few times I interacted personally with the Bedford Police. I found them responsible, quick to respond, and courteous. As a former Bedford School Board member, I found our town police to be exemplar in support of our education and interaction with the students. The need for our children to understand that the police are part of our community, are employed to protect our property, enforce the rules of our town laws, is an important role they have in our community. I personally have not witnessed any bias or unfairness by the police. My concern that reform and reinvention does not degrade the current goodwill and earnest work of the Bedford Police. I urge you to build on what is good. Larry Turner. I also have one from Lucia Roberta. I just wanted to drop a brief line regarding our police force. Our police have done an amazing job in the 20+ years I have lived here. I hope our community does not engage in the reckless conversation regarding defunding or limiting our police. Bedford Mount Kisco is a very diverse community. It is safe for all. I am starting to feel like the community is changing. New residents from other areas of New York provide a mindset we haven't personally experienced here. Let's be careful not to jump on that police are bad bandwagon. In the end, I will end with a post on our Bedford Neighbors Facebook page wishing all a happy Indigenous Peoples. Oh, I'm sorry, that was irrelevant. The next one is from Lloyd Truffleman, who wrote, "It's all about police personal interaction and street visibility within the community. For whatever reason, I rarely see Bedford Police out in the hamlets or at any time outside of their vehicles. Unless I'm just missing it, one never sees them walking around and engaging with citizens during festivals, shopping days, firemen's carnival, farmers markets, town parks, sporting group gatherings, or other public community events. I never hear about them speaking to local civic groups like KVIS, churches, and other such organizations. I know Chief Padilla attends the annual Ask Your Officials Day at the Katona Library, but he usually says little and leaves immediately afterwards without mingling. Otherwise, he and other Bedford police officers are basically invisible at other civic/community events, and there's no regular open houses that I'm aware of at the new police station. So I hope you'll relay to our police that they should get out of their cars and proactively circulate in person around the hamlets more frequently, both on a formal and informal basis, so that they get to know the community and vice versa. How about occasional interviews with the chief in the local newspapers, updating the community on the latest departmental happenings? Of course, with COVID, face-to-face is more challenging, but with the mask and some social distancing, it's not that uncomplicated. That's not that complicated. Meantime, the Bedford PD could hold public Ask Us Anything sessions virtually each month until COVID is behind us sometime late next year, when the aforementioned public in-person activities can be implemented over the long term. And Kathleen Linares writes on the website, she would like to know the explanation or statement for this policy. On the website, it reads, "It is the express policy of the department that police officers will use force only when the exercise of persuasion, advice, and warning is found to be insufficient to obtain public cooperation to an extent necessary to secure observance of law or to restore order, and to use only the minimum degree of physical force which is necessary upon any particular occasion for achieving a police objective." She writes, "What qualifies as insufficient and what constitutes minimus degree? What equipment is used in this situation, training, etc." Cynthia Braun wrote, she has been wondering whether the Bedford Police Department would consider making available a new kind of yard sign, one which states the police department's commitment to equal treatment of people of all races. The sign that the PD is currently offering, "We support our police," is great, but I think it would be more effective at unifying the community if it were to affirm that the Bedford PD stands for fair policing/racial justice. Perhaps something like, "We support the Bedford Police Department's commitment to racial justice." Even though many see the Bedford Police Department signs and the Black Lives Matter signs around town as presenting conflicting political ideologies, they are not necessarily mutually exclusive. Thank you for hosting this very important conversation. And finally, George Almasi writes, I have only good things to say about my interactions with the Bedford Police during my 49-year residence. Those were the emails that I was able to retrieve. There may be more with the new email address that we just set up yesterday. So those will be included with the record on the website. Did anyone sign up while I was reading?
Yes, you have Alexander wants to speak again, and Brett Kaplan would like to speak again.
Okay, Alexander.
Yeah, kind of going back to the idea that we don't really make the decisions to decriminalize things or look the other way. I mean, like, plenty of municipalities have done that, like Brett pointed out in the chat, like police officers and DAs do make decisions whether or not to enforce certain things. And I kind of like the idea of police just generally becoming more like social workers, like we've talked about. If we're not going to defund the police, we could turn the job more into what they do more than 95% of the time, which is, you know, conflict resolution and restorative justice. And restorative justice is a little bit mutually exclusive with going by retributive justice and going by the letter of the law 100% of the time. Was there anything else I wanted to say? No, I'll say something later. Oh, just making our communities a little bit more self-sufficient. I liked Lee's ideas of firearm training. I also like the ideas that the police actually become more disarmed, because police that don't have weapons actually get shot less. So it just reduces violence in general. And, you know, having a gun in a place where a lot of people don't have guns is a pretty intimidating, alienating thing for the community, in my opinion. I learned self-defense from police officers. I benefited from that a lot. Like, any kind of community engagement, I think, is kind of cool idea. All right, so that's all I had to say.
Thank you. And Brett?
Hi, Brett Kaplan again. Adding further support to the idea of disarming the police as much as possible, as often as possible. A lot of police interactions do not require the use of a gun, do not require the use of the inherent threat of carrying a gun, and do not require the added risk of somebody getting shot. That aside, if a number of emails are going to be added to the record that give an uncritical pro-police sentiment, I feel the need to counter that. I would like to see the police defunded and or have those funds reallocated to community support wherever possible. And I do not think that it is indicative of interactions with the police when I hear police support, or at least not interactions with them in their job as police officers. I see the rest of my time.
Thank you. Okay, would anyone else like to say anything? Parveen.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, thank you, Ellen. I think this is great that you're doing this, number one. But I think there is and I haven't had much experience with the Bedford Police Department, except for my husband speeding down West Pound Ridge Road, which he deserved a ticket for. But there is a systemic policing policy, and we do overuse our police system in America. And I don't know, I mean, I know defunding the police is, there's there are lots of, I think people don't really, people misconstrue the meaning of defunding the police. It's really just looking at, I'm sorry, this is how I have to make every conversation work. Because in America we overuse the police, and I say that my husband is from England where they don't carry guns. Most of the police don't carry guns. So that said, how can we really rebuild the system? I mean, it's sort of a broken system at this point, I mean, from what we've seen. And is it possible? Can we have a radical conversation about how to start from scratch? Or I mean, like a lot of people said, Bedford Police Department itself, it's great. At least you have a Latino chief, which I am a North Castle taxpayer, but I live in the town of Bedford, so I'm neither here nor there. That's, so I think Bedford is doing a lot better than what I can say North Castle is doing, Nora. So, and lastly, if I can remember what I wanted to say, is I have another one, a 5-year-old son who is, a cute brown boy at this point, but at what point does he become a threat to the police department? Do I have to have a chat with him as he gets older? So that's it. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Patty?
So I am a social worker. I'm a retired professor of social work, and I think it would be wonderful if every police department in the United States had social workers. On staff, I don't know how realistic that is, but I do know it's very realistic to have mental health professionals on call. And when a police officer gets into a difficult situation, they just hit a button on their phone and the mental health professional comes to the scene to help. And I think that would be wonderful. I think it should, as I wrote in the chat, there's a specific set of professional knowledge and skills in the profession of social work. And one cannot just say, oh, I'm a social worker, and have that be representative of the knowledge base and skill set for the profession. And so it's not easy to convert police officers into social workers or social workers into police officers, but it is very possible for the two professions to work in unison.
Thank you. Anyone else like to say anything? Maybe who hasn't already spoken? Or if you're writing things in the chat and you'd like to say them. Scott, I think you would like to.
Sure. One last thing, just another suggestion as you think about new approaches. There are some of these ideas that we won't, as a town, be able to implement, I believe. For example, I know the Cahoots program was, Hayward, thank you for sending that around. That looked like that was a town of 170,000 people that was used in. We're a town of 10,000, obviously a very different scale. I don't think that should preclude us from approaching some of these ideas. There are interesting things we could consider, like consortiums with other towns where we actually partner with other towns and kind of have social workers that are sort of being shared amongst these towns. The other thing we can think about is lobbying the county and partnering with the county to implement some of these. I know that certainly some of the bigger cities and towns in our area, Yonkers, Greenberg, et cetera, are probably looking into some of these more community approaches to community policing. And so if we can contract with the county, we might be able to leverage some of those shared resources as opposed to hiring our own staff of social workers, which might not be practical given our size. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, so if no one else has any new comments, I think we are going to wrap it up. I think we had over 50 people on the Zoom today, which is a great turnout for our first listening session. We are in the midst of planning additional sessions, perhaps one in person coming up, and also in specific targeted area, with groups, stakeholder groups. So the subcommittees will be making recommendations about which groups they want to hear more from, but also there will be opportunities for everyone in the public to make more comments. George, are you raising your hand? Oh, hold on. Let's see if we can unmute you. Michelle, yeah, there you go.
So I've been listening to everyone. It's been very educational, to say the least, and to hear a little bit of one side more than the other. Police procedure is important, number one. I'm a former police officer, retired in New York City. So there is a lot of training needed, number one. Coverage and overtime, okay, that's another issue. Appearance and militarization, yes. When I moved here 26 years ago, the cars were nice and like green and white, and everyone was happy, and everything turned a little more dark, I should say, for lack of a better word. Intimidation, yes, and that brings upon with the car and the black appearance, and we used to wear light blue in the 80s, and that seemed to be a good feedback for the people. I've been living here, like I said, 26 years, and there's been instances where I could be mowing my lawn and someone came up trying to sell something to the house, and they said, "Is the owner home?" And I would say, "No, he's not." So I kind of took that out, welcome to the neighborhood. But I just went along with it and said, "Oh, this is where I'm living now." And I understand that it's an education. Is it great? No, not by any means. I believe the Bedford Police have been always very professional and courteous. The current leadership, Mel, has been doing a great job. Chief has been doing a great job. But maybe a community liaison is important for the community. That wouldn't be a bad thing to have on the board. You can have social workers in there as well. But remember that every situation that an officer goes to, the situation can explode in a matter of seconds. And I don't know if you can get a social worker there in a matter of seconds unless they're going to ride with a police officer at all time. Something to look at. Community inclusion, yes, Elizabeth. I wish there was more community inclusion. I'm out there always saying hello to people. I ran for the town board back in '09. And I'm not going to say this, that I didn't think I was going to win because I wanted to be positive, but I wanted to say hello to my neighbors and say, hello, yeah, I'm Puerto Rican, and this is my family, and I married an Irish girl, and it's a mixed in our house, and I want to be welcome to the neighborhood, and I want you to include me. And everyone has been very acceptance of my folks here. Bedford is a bubble, and we have to admit that what's going on here, for have a utopian society, would be really nice. But is it reality? No. We'll always have those that want to light the fire. The new people coming in town, and I don't want to even cascade them and put them inside, but the officers coming in involved with them might see a difference where they have a different attitude towards things. When thankfully Bedford doesn't take down statues. We're not about rioting. We accept each other to a point, and this is a very important forum that we have started here, and it is a small step, and it's just the beginning of an acceptance that we all need to understand the both sides. And with that knowledge and understanding, if we can relate to each other better as a society, it can work, but it's not going to be overnight. I can tell you that now. Yes, there is racism in this town, and we have to learn, like we grew up, of course, all of us are adults, so we went through it already, to teach our children that respect each other, number one. And then the bad apples would always be weeded out and just leave the neighborhood, hopefully. But this neighborhood, this Bedford, doesn't have that many. And I think defunding the police is really not an answer, but just understanding how we can relate with them more and understand them more, that they have lives also. We all go home to families, and maybe they had a bad day that day with the wife or the kids, and now they come across you speeding. Oh my God, I'm going to pull this guy over. Oh, and he's dark. Oh, I'm going to really ream into this guy. I never seen that. Hopefully that doesn't go on, but it could go on. But understand that they also have lives, and maybe they need more education in this sense. And I see you raising your hand, Ellen, that I had enough time, but to have more, and forgetting the word now, after a horrific incident, for them to speak to someone where you can understand their side, where they're coming from, that maybe this officer shouldn't be put back on the road immediately if he was involved in something that was really horrific, a bad accident where someone died, a shooting. I don't know what else to say, but I'm glad that this is a beginning. And
thank you.
hopefully we can continue this we can come to an understanding with ourselves.
You're breaking up. Thank you. Is
Thank
there
you.
anyone else that would like to speak before we wrap it up? Okay, thank you all very much for your participation this evening. This Zoom has been recorded and will be posted on the town website on our committee's page, and we will be putting out more information about upcoming listening sessions. We will be doing listening sessions in October, November, and the subcommittees will be working on reviewing information from the police department and writing a draft report with recommendations by January. So there will be more opportunities for public comment about those recommendations and more interaction on this topic. So stay tuned. Thank you very much, everyone. Good night.